My meeting Gene, you probably read about in that article, a very serendipitously meeting him in a workshop, and wanting wanting to really understand the power of therapy, how it can change you, how it can make the world seem different. I mean, and just in a few hours in a week, or an hour in a week, how can that be? And when I met Gene, what I noticed most was his way of making contact with people. First of all, his humility, and I don't even know if the word humility is the right word, because he wouldn't even think of it as humility. His rapt attention to the micro moment of being together, and his delight in opening up what that moment meant and sharing the whole experience of the felt sense, as if he knows a secret that can change the world, and he has the opportunity to show it to us in this moment, and being totally into that. And so I had invited him to be my therapist, and also to do a training. So I hosted the training, and he was my therapist for that year that he was in New York. I had come to New York from Long Island, and was sort of making my way to find myself in New York, and so wanted my passion was to want to learn how to relate. I had been a very shy young person, and somewhat isolated, and didn't know how to make relating happen. And when I saw Gene being so connected, I very much wanted to learn that from him. And I felt like, oh, I'm going to be in his presence and learn how to relate. And he welcomed me with open arms. You know, he was delighted to be my therapist, to do the training, to talk to any of the people that my friends that I invited to the training. And the kind of relating that we did, the kind of relationship that he and I had, I think I described as a warm bath. Very welcoming, very soft, very interested and intense. I mean, he was very interested in who I was and what I thought. But what was missing, and I don't know that I could have said it then, or maybe I could have, is that that relational part of being able to talk about the you and me. That wasn't Gene. He was sort of shy about expressing anything personal in that kind of way about the relationship between us. And I was not able to express that. And I wondered years after that, like now, what would have happened if he or I could have, if I could have said, I'm really trying to learn how to relate to people, and I don't know how to relate to you, if I had been able to say that. And of course, we were relating, and in our own way, and we were growing that us. He and I were growing in us that really carried on the whole rest of our lives. I say our lives because he's still a very close person in me and to me. And we grew our own particular kind of us. But there's something that I just thought of today that I never thought of before. I wanted to learn about the us, and he wanted the us. His way would be for the us to be implicit, but to be completely there in it, but not to talk about it explicitly. And he and I then, after he came back, we were more colleagues and would argue about the relational part of focusing oriented therapy. And he would say, no, it doesn't need to be explicit. And I would say, yes, everything, if we explicate something, it becomes a vehicle of change. So yes, we do, but that we were acting it out. And I never thought of that till today. We were acting out that tension between us about that, about his way of being in us and my way of being in us. So the feeling of that us was a kind of intensity and warmth and delicacy. It was a tenderness. And I felt Gene had that with many people. Although he and I, of course, had our own particular kind of us. And I'm bringing that to you as a way of just finding attention to the quality of the us, and to the nature of the us. Not the nature of it in terms of, is this a good therapist or a bad therapist, but the nature of what is that particularity of the way we come together? What can we do together? How do we do it? And then I was thinking of what Gene said about his therapy with Carl Rogers. And Gene was Carl's student and then collaborator, and Carl was his therapist. And Gene had made comments about how you didn't have to make the relationship explicit in order for it to be a relationship, in order for the relationality to be the vehicle of the healing. And he said, I never could have told Carl how I experienced him as genuine, or Carl was talking about how that was the important aspects of therapy, to be genuine, have positive regard, and to be prized. I felt, Gene said, I felt myself as this weird person who this guy Midwesterner could never understand. And yet I felt somewhere that he did understand me, but I didn't think that. I just experienced it, and we never talked about it. And so today, when I was preparing to talk to you, I was thinking, I wonder if Carl had said, well, do you feel I understand you? Would that have pushed Gene away? Or would that have brought Gene closer? Or what does understanding the dynamic of talking about the relationship do? You may very, very well decide not to, but then what happens if you do, or can you learn to do it in a very attuned way with the felt sense? And that's where, focusing comes in to make relational therapy much more powerful and attuned, because we can learn how to sense what we want to say and to pull back. Oh, I see, that wasn't the right question, right? We learn that through studying how we articulate the felt sense. So I wanted to see what you thought about those, and if you have any stories about the felt sense of your relationship with your therapist or with a client, a very particular kind of feeling, which changes, of course, all the time, but there's a flavor to it that we can become attuned to.